Well, yet again, it's a very worrying day here on the podcast channel because it's only mid September and silly season in a managerial merry-go-round has already arrived in the EFL Championship. Today, we are back to talk about Stoke City, who I think it would be fair to say pretty surprisingly sacked Steven Schumacher at the start of this week, and they have replaced him on Wednesday with, well, a bit of an unknown quantity when it comes to a head coach's role in England. From the Norwich City coaching team, Narcis Pelach is the man to come in and replace him on a 3-year deal. We'll talk a bit more about him in a minute, but as always, first, we're going to have a chat about the old man and then what we expect from the new one. So let's start with Steven Schumacher, who so far has racked up a pretty impressive managerial CV. We all know the job that he did at Plymouth Argyle, bringing them up as champions with a 52% win rate and had them playing exciting, expansive football and looking pretty comfortable in the EFL Championship. They certainly declined last season after he left. Then he came to Stoke City in December, and I think it's fair to say he had a slightly slower start. There were a few people calling for his head as they dropped into the relegation zone after sort of 8 to 10 games in charge. But they finished the season with real promise, real confidence, and plenty of good form as well. And even this season had started okay. 6 points from the first 5 games, including only 2 games at home in that time. And when you consider that the games they've played, yes, they had a couple of disappointments in there, but they lost against West Brom, for example, and an informed Watford side. 2 of the teams that actually have only lost 1 game between them already this year and have both been very recent Premier League teams. So a little bit of a surprising one to hear on Monday morning that he'd been sacked. Sporting director John Walters came out with his chest pumped and a few statements we'll read in a moment. But Steven Schumacher sacked from Stoke City with a 40.6% win rate, by far the best of any recent Stoke City manager. And just at a time where they looked like, I know the performances were a little bit slow at the start of this season, but you've made a lot of changes to the squad. That's going to happen. It happens for a lot of teams. There's plenty that haven't looked great so far this year. There's probably only 4 or 5 that have looked consistently good. But for Stoke, they were going in the right direction. It was probably the first time since they've come down from the Premier League where, as a neutral, I looked at Stoke and went, wow, I can actually see a vision here. I can see them getting into the top half and starting to push back towards the playoffs over the next few seasons. And with a manager who's proved he can do it in an entertaining way, both a little bit at the back end of last year, but also with Plymouth Argyle as well. They had a brilliant, exciting young squad, put out an incredibly young team in that thrilling Carabao Cup win at Middlesbrough a few weeks ago. So where on earth has this come from? Rumours of disagreements between him and John Walters, rumours of a little bit of discussion about team selection and things like that, which is never good when it's coming from the boardroom. But off he goes, Steven Schumacher, with no harm to his CV at all. And we mentioned this with a couple of clubs in recent seasons in the Championship, and even a couple of Stoke fans have mentioned it to us since in the comments in Discord, whatever, that it is becoming one of those jobs like, maybe not to the extent of Watford, but there are other clubs around in EFL where a manager leaves a club and their CV just isn't harmed at all. I mean, to be honest, on paper, the job he's done looks pretty decent, and he certainly dragged them away from it last year. So I think from a neutral point of view, it did look a bit of a baffling one. Bit early in the season to say it's right up there with some of the howlers from last season, but we did see, I take examples, John Eustace, Tony Mowbray, sacking managers early in the season when they're doing okay. Doesn't always work out too well, and there weren't many examples of it going the other way last year. So out with Steven Schumacher and in with Narcis Pelach, a Catalan Spanish manager who has had spells managing in sort of B teams in the Spanish pyramid, and has also been an assistant to Carlos Corberán at Huddersfield and to David Wagner at Norwich City last season. He comes in on a 3-year deal with no real senior experience at this level as a head coach. But that doesn't matter, does it? Because John Walters has got a lot to say for himself on this one. He says, across the extensive dialogue he's had in football, including at the highest levels of the game, Narcis is one of the most respected and sought after coaches around. Now, I do want to kind of pick up on this a little bit because I'm not doubting it. I'm not doubting he's an incredibly well-respected coach and working with people like Corberán and Wagner, both excellent managers in EFL in recent seasons. However, I would suggest that if he was one of the most sought after coaches, he wouldn't have just been at Huddersfield and Norwich that whole time, and he would have been taken by the top clubs, because we know plenty are going to take a gamble these days. However, he had worked at Girona as well, and he'd been a head coach in the lower levels in Spain from the age of 25. So he's got a bit of experience despite the young age. We can't be fooled by that. But it is an opportunity for Stoke to go in a different direction. One of the things that we have accused in recent years is going for the same type of manager, be it an Alex Neil, a Nathan Jones, a Gary Rowett, all playing slightly different styles of football, Michael O'Neill as well, but British managers with a fairly robust tactical system that haven't got too much flexibility in it. And for whatever reason, that strategy just hasn't worked at Stoke, no matter what level of players have been in, whether they've been good, whether they've been squads that we've not thought were as good on paper. It just hasn't worked. So this one does represent an opportunity for that to change. It's definitely a left field appointment by Stoke City standards. Is it a better one than Schumacher, though? Time will tell on that front. You always have problems in this situation, and I go back to Wayne Rooney and Mick Beale last season at the two clubs we mentioned a moment ago. If you sack a manager when you're doing okay, when you've been in good form, and actually, if you look at his stats over the last sort of 17, 18 games, it's a really good record for Schumacher. It does ask the question, what happens if he has a poor start? Do you get 4 or 5 games in, like we saw at Birmingham last year, and the fans are suddenly going, why on earth have you done that? Because we had a decent manager, we were doing okay, and now we're dropping down the table, and the panic sets in and the fear sets in. And John Waters is opening himself up for a lot of criticism here because he's not been particularly glowing in his talk about Steven Schumacher, and there's already been a few things come out since then. I think Steven Schumacher highlighted via the LMA and a few media outlets that he was a bit shocked with what happened at the weekend and on Monday. But they've tried to placate that Stoke by bringing Dean Whitehead, a club legend, back in alongside him. And obviously he's left a job after 2 months in the EFL as well. So it's a bit of a weird time. And obviously this one could have a knock-on effect on Norwich City, a championship rival, where he's left a new manager there, who he was assisting and helping out as one of the sort of continuity people at the club, same as the goalkeeping coach who's come from Norwich as well. So it could have an effect on them, but we'll worry about that later and in future prediction shows. But he does mention, Pelach, that he's had a chance to become a head coach in England before. It'd be interesting to see what clubs they were with. But he's very excited about this job. And of course, to come and manage in a championship's a great opportunity. I don't want to be too sort of cynical, but we mention it quite often in a championship. If you can get a 3 or 4 year contract, which he's done here with a 3-year deal, the average lifespan of a championship manager is less than a season. So from a financial point of view, it could be incredibly rewarding for him. But is it going to be an opportunity to take the club to the next level? Well, we don't really know because under Corberán and Wagner, he's been with managers that play a slightly different style. He's also seen very different styles in Spain as well. And we've seen managers that are adaptable. Carlos Corberán obviously worked famously under Marcelo Bielsa, but West Brom has adapted to a side that is incredibly disciplined and hard to beat with counter-attacking flair. At Norwich with David Wagner, a very different style of manager because Wagner at Huddersfield previously, ironically, had been really attacking, really expansive, but he adapted his Norwich team to be very disciplined and cautious. So is that maybe a positive sign for this head coach that we're going to see someone who is adaptable and is flexible? We mentioned that lack of flexibility for other previous head coaches who had a style and stuck to it. Is this going to be one where he says, well, this is the way I like to play, but I understand to get the best out of my players, I've got to do this, this and this, because those two head coaches he's worked with in recent seasons are perfect examples of that and getting Norwich and West Brom respectively into the playoffs, despite the fact at times they've had huge gaping holes in the squad when it comes to strength and depth in certain areas. So that's a promising sign, that's a positive. The negative is, as it always is when it's someone coming into a higher profile head coach role for the first time, you never know what you're going to get on the man management side. I always go back to the example at my club Luton with Graham Jones and Nathan Jones, two managers that came in having never managed before. And sorry, Stoke fans, to bring up Nathan Jones again, but in one of those instances, we had a coach who was an incredibly good man manager, got the best out of people, inspired people, and one who, despite being a world-renowned coach, just could not deliver that on a training ground in Graham Jones, could not deal with the media, the man management side, and ended up having a difficult time as a result. So that's always the gamble you're taking in a situation like this. But of course, in modern football, this is the drive. This is the way things are going. And there are more and more clubs that are going down this route. So you can't blame Stoke City for doing it. It's certainly a departure from the way that you could argue has failed them for 6 or 7 years or seasons now. But is it the right time? I just felt they had the right man in Schumacher. I've got to be honest. I rate him incredibly highly as a coach. I think they were building. We've seen even at the top level of the game, look at people like Arteta with Guardiola. It took them a year or two, even at monstrously sized clubs. How can you expect it to happen straight away? and Schumacher was starting to get those components together. So I think something's gone on behind the scenes. I'm incredibly surprised at the timing of it. But let's have a look ahead to Stoke's next few games, because that's going to ask the question as to whether there may be early pressure or early opportunities for the new man. Because the big news is 4 of the first 6 games are at home. And if you look on paper, there's a few relatively friendly ones in there. Hull City have probably bugged Cardiff, been the worst side in the division so far. That one's live here tomorrow night. We are going to be doing a watch along here, so you can come and have a chat with me and watch it together. They've then got Portsmouth at home a week on Wednesday. Then you've got Norwich at home a couple of weeks later, which you should know the club inside out and the way they're going to play. And Bristol City just after that, who have been diabolical travellers so far this year. And away games against Borough and Swansea, who have both at times struggled for goals. It does open a lot of opportunities in those first 6 matches. But you look at the flip side, the reverse of that. If they don't pick up those results, we mentioned what happened last year with other managers who came in similar situations. The tide can turn very quickly, because suddenly you've gone through a lot of your winnable fixtures. You've not picked up a big number of points. And then you go into a run looking ahead to sort of late November through to Christmas for them. In that period, they play Sunderland, Leeds, Burnley, Luton, Sheffield Wednesday away, all in the space of sort of 5 weeks. Sunderland twice in that spell as well, to be fair. That's when things can get pretty tricky if you haven't already picked up some of the points. So I actually think in this instance, it's maybe more important than in some other appointments that he hits the ground running. Schumacher last year, it was a bit of a role reversal where the easier run of fixtures came towards the end of the season. Here, this has got to be a quick start, because the next couple of months are the real opportunities to pick up the points, or you could end up looking at trouble again. And Stoke City, as we've seen in recent seasons, are not afraid anymore to change a manager pretty quickly. So I've got to be honest on the face of it. I try and be optimistic in most of these. We try and be realistic. I don't think it's the right decision personally, but we don't know how this is going to go. We always have this situation now more and more where we just don't know what to expect from the new man. We don't know what we're going to get. But given some of the head coaches he's worked under, if he shows that flexibility and adaptability, I don't think it's going to be the most exciting season for Stoke, but I do think they'll be able to be comfortable and solid. And there's a young, exciting squad there to build for the future. I just thought Schumacher was the right man to do it, having done something very similar at another EFL club recently. We always ask the questions at the end, how are the club going to get on this season, and will the manager see out their contracts? The second question is basically pointless now, because virtually no manager does in a championship. Unless you're Mark Robbins, you're not seeing out your contract basically, are you? Whereas on this season side of it, I think Stoke will still be okay, but that breakthrough potentially into the top half and an outside playoff push that I'd predicted pre-season, I don't think that's going to materialise now. I do think that this is going to take some time to adapt to, and they're clearly going for a very different style, but unlike other clubs who did the same thing last season, are they going to be patient if it doesn't start like a house on fire? We'll wait and find out the answer to that, but it doesn't really matter what I think, does it? What do you think if you're a Stoke City fan, or if you're a fan of a championship rival? Do you think they've made the right decision? Do you think letting Schumacher go was as much of a surprise as I did? And do you think the new man, Narcis Pelach, is going to take them to the next level? And finally, be the solution to a few years of pain for Stoke fans. Let us know your thoughts on that down in the comments. Let us know how you think they'll get on Friday. And make sure you come and join us on this channel, as we will be doing a watch along and chatting all things championship ahead of the weekend. For now, if you did enjoy this video, please do chuck a thumbs up on it. Make sure you check out our full prediction show for this weekend. We preview and predict all 12 matches and encourage you to get involved too. That is up in the eye above, as well as our pre-season championship predictions and other recent manager specials. If you want to stay up to date with everything else, subscribe and turn that notification bell on. For Stoke City fans, are you excited or are you worried? Let us know your thoughts, and we'll see you here again soon, as we're back tomorrow night to watch Stoke City live.